And we're back to freecodecamp, still JavaScript, and we should be right here. Basic data structures, it's 20 tasks. Let's go over them in detail. It's a little bit, I don't want to say repetitive, but it uses principles that we've already seen in the first JavaScript course. So it repeats a couple of these elements. For example, here we've got a simple array and then a multi-dimensional array. As always, read through the details yourself. I want to show you how to solve it and explain how I solved it. On the right hand side, what we need is an array. We already have it right here, declared, let your array. Now we want to initialize it, so use these square brackets and then quotation marks. Then we add a name as a string, a number, and a boolean. So that's what we need. And we need two more elements. We can just invent something as long as we have one string, in this case name, one number, which is 12 in my case, and one boolean, which I've set to true. We're good. So I add 38 and false, and now we're done here. We can access arrays. There are multiple ways to do this. In this case, we want to use the bracket notation. So the example on the left, our array with an index of 0 would be A, and this would then be stored in the our variable let. And our array 1 would be B, and we can set it to not B anymore. But this way of writing, our array would be A, not B anymore, and C. We want to change the second position here of my array on the right hand side. And we want to use the bracket notation, so we use my array brackets, so these square brackets. And we want to set it to anything, so let me just use that. Besides the letter B, so we want to replace B at the second position, which has the index of 1. And you can see that down here it's printed out. So if I change it to name, it's right there at the second position. So this is the way to solve this task. Push and unshift, already seen that as well in the basic JavaScript course section on freecodecamp. Let's go over unshift here on the left hand side with the example Roman numerals is our array. And we use unshift to put these two values at the front of our array. So if we print it out, Roman numerals would have, what is it, 14, 20, and then it would have 21 and 22. It's not 14, right? The first one should be 19. So ix is 19. Let's check push. We can use that to add something at the end of an array. In this case, we use 23, and we push it to Roman numerals. Let's go over the right hand side. We've got our array as a parameter in the function mixed numbers. I want to use unshift and push. Let's first use arr.unshift, and we want to add this one to the start of our array. Now here it is, so it's printed out directly at the bottom. We also want to add something at the end, right after 4, 5, 6, and we can use push for that. So all that we have to write is arr.push, and then add 7, Roman 8, and 9. Now it's right here, so it's added to the arr array, and it's printed out. You can also remove items from arrays, for example using pop and shift, which is, you could see it as the inverse of push and unshift. So if we use pop on this array called greetings, we would get rid of Sia, so the last one is popped out of the array, you could say. And we can obviously just store it in a new variable. For example, here let popped, greetings pop. So popped would now store hello, which will be the last element of the greetings array. And now we want to use pop and shift on our right hand side for this array that's given. It's once again called ARR. We want to store them, so the values that we pop and shift in these new variables. In this case, we store complete inside of the popped variable, and with the shift method, we'll store challenge inside of shifted. You can also remove items using splice, which gives you, let's say, a little bit more freedom, so you can determine the position where you want to extract elements from your array. So in this case, we use array with 5 elements, and we splice it at index position 2, and then we'll get rid of 2 consecutive elements. So in this case, not so would be taken out of this array, and array would only has today was great. Another example right here, I am feeling really happy. Index position 3 would be really, and then we would get rid of 2 elements, so really happy, and then store it inside of the new variable new array. Let us use it on the right hand side, arr.splice. What do we want to do? We want to sum it up to 10. So we'll have to get rid, let me check, of these elements right here, 4, 5, 1, 7. Then we have 2, 5, 2, 1 left, and this will be 10. So index position 1 will start there with the 4, and then we get rid of 4 elements. So we need the 4 after the comma, and then 2, 5, 2, 1 is left, which would sum up to 10. We can also add items using splice. So right here in the example, you have start index and amount to delete. We already know that. And afterwards, we have 13 and 14 because we want to add that to our array, in this case numbers. Start index is 3, therefore we'll start at number 12 and amount to delete 1. So we'll get rid of one of these 12 elements and then add 13 and 14 in its place. Let's go over this on the right hand side. ARR is our array again, .splice. We want to remove the first 2 elements of the array. So we'll start at index 0, 2 for the 2 elements. And then we want to add dark salmon and blanched almond. And if we add that, you can see it will be placed at the start of our array. You can see it down here. So dark salmon and blanched almond have now replaced dark goldenrod and white smoke, and afterwards lavender blush, pale turquoise and firebrick are still part of our array. Now we use slice to copy elements. So this is a little bit different from what we've used so far. Because slice, it basically leaves the original array unaffected. Here we have weather conditions, it has 5 elements, and we slice it at position 1 where there's snow. And we'll end with the slicing right here at the 3rd index position where it says hail. Therefore, snow and sleet will be stored in today's weather, but the original weather conditions array, it's still the same, so it was left unaffected. Slice doesn't really take something out or add anything to it. Instead, it's just used to copy elements from it and store it, for example, in a new variable. Let us use it on the right hand side, ar.slice. We want to have warm and sunny. Warm is at index position 2. Therefore we need 2, comma, and we want to stop after sunny, which will be cool, and this is index position 4. Therefore ar.slice 2, 4. The original array is returned, so we haven't taken anything away from it. But we actually want to return this part, so let me cut that out and paste it right here. So now only warm and sunny is returned. So this is what freecodecamp wants us to do. And now we should pass this test. Let's check the next one. Copy an array with the spread operator. So these are these 3 dots. This array has 5 elements, and we can use the spread operator to store all of these elements in a new array. Let's call that array. Let me check what we have to do here on the right hand side. We have a function called copyMachine, 2 parameters, an array and a num. We want to return a new array made up of num copies of the array. So right, the ARR is given, and then it should be copied into a new variable, or it should be returned as often as the num parameter says. So on the example on the right hand side, we have true, false, true as our array ARR, and the num is 2, so we want to have that array copied 2 times. We already have a new array declared right here outside of our while loop, so we can use that. And we want to use the push method that we've seen before. And we want to push our array. So here you can already see it's printed out correctly. So this array is being pushed to new ARR, our new array, and it's pushed 2 times because our num is 2. And as long as num is bigger or equal to 1, it's going to get pushed. And num minus minus decrements it by 1. And if we now use the spread operator, you can see that this array information is put into a single array, so not a multi-dimensional array, but a single dimension array. And this is what we want. Well, let me check. I misread something here. We want to have it multi-dimensional, so you can get rid of the spread operator, but we have to use it. So don't forget to add the square brackets, and then we have a multi-dimensional array. So this should be the solution. Let's go to combine arrays with the spread operator. So here it is once again. We have this array and that array, and these 4 elements from this array will be placed inside of that array in between the first 2 and the last one, coriander. Let us check the right hand side. Function is called spreadout. It returns the variable sentence. And we want to change the sentence so that our function returns learning to code is fun. To code is already given as the fragment. And we want to change code line 3, let sentence equals And then we'll add our square brackets. Then learning, spread operator fragments. We already have learning to code. We also want to add is fun. So comma, don't forget quotation marks for is and for fun. And this is what we should need. Check for the presence of an element with indexOf. I'm not so sure if we have used that before, but it's a simple concept. IndexOf can be used to find the position of a certain element inside of an array. Let's go to the left hand side for the examples. We have a fruits array, and for example, index of orange would be 2. Index of pears would be 1. There are 2 pears, but it's going to find the first one and then it's going to give you that number. And index of dates is -1 because dates isn't part of our fruits array. So every time it isn't part of it, you will just get a -1. Here's our array in the example. Squash, onions, shallots. We want to check if mushrooms is part of it, which is the elem. So we can use an if statement, and if arr.indexOf elem is unequal to -1, we want to return true, and otherwise we'll return false. So in this case, mushroom would be a -1, therefore false is returned. Let me, for example, change mushrooms to something that's part of the array. And then you can see that the true part of the if statement also works. The indexOf can't return a -1, and therefore it is unequal to -1 and true is returned. And if it's mushrooms, it is -1, therefore false is returned. We can also use a quicker way or simpler way to write it, which is this ES6 kind of notation. So we can write return arr.indexOf elem, and if it's unequal to -1 question mark, true is returned, otherwise false is returned. So this would also be a solution that would work. So if you want to use this ES6 way of writing it, you're fine with this one too. Let's go to the next one, iterate through all an array's items using for loops. So another concept that we've already seen in the basics course, which is this for loop. Let us check the example first on the left hand side. Function is called greater than 10. We have a new array declared and then the for loop comes. The arr array is passed to a function. We check the length of it, compare it to our variable I, which is equal and initially set to 0, and then increment it for each iteration of the loop. And if arr with the index of I is bigger than 10, this value is going to get pushed to our new array. So all of the values that are bigger than 10 will now be stored in the new array, which is then returned. Go over the right hand side, filtered array. We've got a new array already declared, and now we want to use a for loop. So let us add the basic structure of it. We need the for. Regular brackets inside will declare a counter, let I equal 0. We want to compare that to our array length, and we want to increment it for each iteration. So it's the same structure that's used on the left hand side. And now, let me read it carefully. We use an if statement. And if a certain condition is true, we want to use our variable right here, the new array, and then push the array that's passed as an argument to our function. So arr at the index position I to our new array. So now we have to check what the condition should be. We've got our elem, and we want to check the arr at an index position I and use indexOf elem. And if this is -1, so it's not part of it, it's going to get pushed. And if it's part of it, it's not going to get pushed. So what this basically means is, here's the 3, our elem, and if it's part of an array, it's not going to get pushed. So in this case, new array would be empty, as every single array inside of the given array has a 3 that's part of it. But if I change that to 9, you can see only the last one is not being pushed. So the first 3 are pushed to our new array. And if I, for example, change it, let me check to 2. So the first array right here doesn't get pushed as it has a 2 inside. And second, third, and fourth are pushed. So this is what our function does now. Let's move on. Create complex multi-dimensional arrays. It's easy to get lost in these multi-dimensional arrays. For example, here we've got nested array, and I believe it has like 5 dimensions or 5 levels. Deep, for example, is at level 2. So there's this big one, it's level 1. Right here, and then deep would be level 2. Deeper would be level 3. Once again, the big one is 1. Here would be the second level, and here's the third for deeper. Deepest is at level 4. And the final one is at level 5. Once again, let us count. Here's the big one, level 1. Here's level 2, level 3, level 4, and finally level 5. You can use the bracket notation to access this multi-dimensional array. For example, the deepest, which is at level 5, would be accessed like this, 2, 1, 0, 0, 0. Let me check what we have to do here on the right hand side. So we are supposed to create a multi-dimensional array. The one that we've got already has 2 levels. We want to make it 5 levels of depth. So here's the first one. Remember, the outermost array is level 1, so that's the big one. And this would already be level 2. And on the third level we would add deep, so let me create a third level, maybe right here. And I add deep inside. Don't let me mix up these quotation marks, so if you have double quotation marks and single ones, you need to have them in pairs. You know what, let me just run it and we can check the cases one by one. So right here, for level 3 deep, we are already correct. So let us add the 4th level with deeper. Maybe I add it right here. and I add deeper. I run the tests and it should pass now for level 4. And level 5 should be deepest. Let me add that right here. And now we should be good. Let's go over this once more. As I said, it's easy to get lost. Maybe you want to pause the video and check these levels for yourself. We'll move on to add key value pairs to JavaScript objects. So we're done with arrays in this course section, and we'll move on to objects. Here we have a second character, and we'll add new properties. For example, origin, South Korea, or hair color dyed orange, and eyes, eye color. And we'll add an eye color of brown. So there are 3 ways to add new properties to objects in JavaScript that are presented here. And we've got our foods object right here on the right hand side, and we want to add properties to it with given values. Let me use all of these different ways to do it. First one would be foods.bananas equals 13. And then we have bananas with a value of 13 added to our object foods, which is directly printed below. Let's use the second way of doing it, foods, square brackets. And this would be for grapes, 135. And the final one is using a variable that we have declared here. So on the left hand side it was the eyes variable. Let me check that for what we need on the right hand side. We need the strawberries with a value of 27. We want to add that to foods. So let me declare a variable, maybe I'll call it strawberry, not strawberries. And I set this variable to strawberries, which is the property that we want to add. Don't forget the quotation marks. Foods, strawberry will now be set to the value, what was it, 27. And now this one's also added to our object. So these are the 3 ways that you can use. And we should be good with this task. So we're ready to move on to modify an object nested within an object. So kind of like multi-dimensional arrays, you can also have these multi-dimensional objects, you could say. So in this case, nested object has an object called data, which is nested inside. And if you want to access that, you can use the dot notation. You can see that below, nested object.data.onlineStatus.busy equals 10. So you go through this like you would go through a multi-dimensional array. We've got our object user activity. We want to access online and set it to 45. So we need user activity.data .online and then equal to 45. And now you can see it down below. It was changed now from 42 to 45. Access property names with bracket notation. So instead of using the dot notation, we are now using a bracket notation. Let us just directly use our example on the right hand side. That becomes clearer. So we've got a function called check inventory with a parameter called scan items. The argument that's passed is apples, and we've got that inside of our foods set to 25. So we use foods. So object then we use these square brackets, and our parameter scanned items. I've said it's apples in this case. And we want to return that. So don't forget to set return the keyword before it. And as apples is 25, 25 would now be returned. If apples was grapes, for example, it would be 35. The delete keyword is now used to remove object properties. So instead of adding, we are now going to delete properties. All you need is the delete keyword, then add your object name, and then the property that you want to remove, in this case oranges. So oranges is now gone. But we also want to delete plums and strawberries, so I copy paste this 2 times, and now I change oranges to plums, which is now gone. And finally strawberries. So we only have apples, bananas and grapes left in our foods object. Check if an object has a property. So we can just check without deleting or adding any properties by using hasOwnProperty. Our object is called users in this case. We want to see if certain names are part of it. In our function called isEveryone_here. So we want to return users. In this case we use the parameter user object, which is set to users when we call this function. So user object.hasOwnProperty. And then let's check Alan first. But we also want to check it for other names. For example, Jeff, Sarah and Ryan. So let us use these and signs. And then I copy this code line and I just change the names to Jeff, Sarah and Ryan. So we're good here. Iterate through the keys of an object with a for in statement. For in, we've used that before, I believe, in freecodecamp. But it's good to repeat it. Let me check what we need here on the left hand side. Alright, so we want to check if certain users are online or not by using the function countOnline. So we can dive right into code line 15. Let us declare a new variable. Maybe I call that number, counter, whatever. You have to declare it outside of your statement. Then add the for statement. Let user in users. In this case, users is passed as an argument, and the parameter is called users object. So let user in users obj. And if users obj square brackets and then user. So Alan, Jeff, Sarah would be the user. Then .online. Don't forget it because we want to access the property online. And if this is equal to true, use curly brackets. And then we want to increment the number. So we want to find how many of these users are online. So every time online is true, we'll add 1 to number, and don't forget to return the number in the end. So if I, for example, change this to false, you can see that 2 users are found now that are false. Or we want to set it to true. And this should be the solution if I haven't made any mistakes or misread something. Generate an array of all object keys with Object.keys. And I believe this is already the final task in this basic data structures segment. We have a function called getArrayOfUsers with the parameter obj. And we want to return an array containing all the properties in our object, which is called users. So we use this new Object.keys on our parameter obj. So write it like this. And obviously we want to return it. So we have Alan, Jeff, Sarah, and Ryan. All of the users in the object users are now being returned. And there's still one more task, so it was not the final one. Here we should have the final one, which is modify an array stored in an object. So sometimes you also have arrays stored in objects. Here, for example, our object is user. It has 3 keys: name, age, data. Data has 5 keys: username, join data, organization, friends, and location. And friends in this case is an array with Sam, Kira, Tomo. We want to adjust our function addFriend. It uses 2 parameters, user obj and friend. And the arguments passed are user and Pete. So user was our object. We use user obj dot data because we want to find the friend, and then dot friends. So we have Sam, Kira, and Tomo for now. But we want to add Pete to it, so we want to push this. And the easiest way to write that, at least the easiest way that I could come up with, is just to use dot push and then add the friend inside. But let me check. We don't want to have 4 names in total. We want to have the names returned then, if I read that correctly. So instead of having 4, which would now be 4 friends returned, we want to have Sam, Kira, Tomo, and Pete returned. So let me write it like this. We have now pushed it to our user. Therefore, I return user obj.data.friends afterwards. And here is now Pete. So this should be the solution that we need. Let me check. And we were correct. And this was it. So we've gone through this course section in JavaScript Basic Data Structures right here. Next up is basic algorithm scripting. I try to finish this for next week, but maybe these tasks are a little bit more complex, so I have to check, but I try to upload the next video on next Sunday. I hope this video was helpful. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.